You know that feeling when you finally understand something you've been looking at your whole life but never truly saw? That's what happens for so many of us after 60. And if you're nodding right now, you're not alone. For decades, we've been told our best years were behind us, that youth was the pinnacle, that after a certain age, life becomes about winding down, stepping aside, becoming invisible. But here's what nobody mentions. Those voices, they weren't ours. They were the world's expectations, and we carried them like heavy stones in our pockets. I've watched women in their 60s describe it the same way, like waking up from a dream they didn't know they were having. Suddenly, the fog lifts, the noise quiets, and for the first time, maybe ever, they can hear their own thoughts clearly. This isn't about giving up or settling. It's the opposite. It's about finally having the clarity to see what actually matters, stripped of all the performance we've been doing since we were young. The constant proving, the endless accommodating, the shape-shifting to fit into boxes others built for us. After 60, something shifts. The rules that governed us for so long start losing their grip. And in that space, that precious hard-won space, we discover something remarkable. We discover what happens when we stop living for everyone else's approval. Let me show you what I mean. Remember when you used to check your reflection 3 times before leaving the house? Not for yourself, but imagining what they'd think. Your mother-in-law, the school pickup crowd, your husband's colleagues at the company dinner. That exhausting performance, it fades after 60. I know a woman named Margaret who told me she wore heels to the grocery store for 30 years. 30 years. Because that's what put-together women do. At 62, she bought her first pair of comfortable walking shoes. She said it felt like a revolution happening right there in aisle 7. This is what freedom from societal pressure actually looks like. It's not dramatic, it's quiet. It's permission you finally give yourself. For decades, we lived inside invisible boxes. The good mother box, the supportive wife box, the youthful-looking woman box, the successful career woman box, and God forbid you didn't fit neatly into at least 2 of them. The judgment was swift, the whispers were loud, but after 60, those boxes start to dissolve, not because society suddenly became enlightened, it didn't, but because we stopped caring about its opinion quite so desperately. Your kids are grown, your career chapters closing are closed. The beauty standards that tortured you, you've aged out of their target demographic entirely. And here's the twist nobody warns you about. That exclusion becomes liberation. When you're no longer trying to prove you're young enough, successful enough, attractive enough, devoted enough, when all that noise finally quiets, you're left with something profound. Space. Mental space. Emotional bandwidth you haven't had since you were a girl. And in that space, something begins to grow. Something that's been buried under decades of other people's expectations. You start to remember who you actually are, not who you were supposed to be. And that recognition, that's where real self-acceptance begins. Self-acceptance isn't a light switch. It's more like watching the sunrise, gradual, then suddenly you're standing in full daylight wondering when exactly the darkness lifted. After 60, you stop apologizing for taking up space. You stop saying sorry when someone else bumps into you. You stop prefacing every opinion with, "I might be wrong, but..." You were never wrong about most of it. You were just taught that certainty wasn't feminine. I watched my friend Linda order exactly what she wanted at a restaurant for the first time at 64. Not what seemed healthy enough, not what wouldn't seem too expensive, not the salad because everyone else got salads. She ordered the pasta she'd been craving, and when it arrived, she didn't perform guilt about it. She just ate it, enjoyed it. The revolution is in these tiny moments. This authenticity changes everything about how you move through the world. You stop volunteering for committees you hate. You say no without crafting elaborate excuses. You let phone calls go to voicemail. You wear the colors you actually like, not the ones that are slimming or age-appropriate. You prioritize your own values, finally. Maybe that means spending Sunday mornings painting instead of hosting brunch. Maybe it means admitting you never liked hosting brunch. Maybe it means choosing the friend who makes you laugh over the one who needs constant emotional rescue. And here's what nobody tells you. This isn't selfish. This is survival. This is sanity. This is the prerequisite for everything that comes next. Because when you're finally comfortable in your own skin, when you've shed the costume you wore for decades, you can actually see clearly. You can assess what you want from whatever years remain, not what you should want, what you actually want. And that clarity that's built on something else entirely, something you've been accumulating without even realizing it. Wisdom. Not the kind you read in books or hear in TED Talks. The kind that lives in your bones because you earned it through decades of falling down and getting back up. By 60, you've lived through enough patterns to recognize them. You've watched friends make the same mistake 3 times and learn from their 4th attempt. You've seen marriages crumble and others inexplicably thrive. You've witnessed careers that look perfect from the outside hollow people out, and humble lives that seem small from a distance turn out to be deeply satisfying. This isn't about being smarter. It's about having a reference library that younger people simply don't possess yet. When your daughter calls in tears about her terrible boss, you don't just sympathize. You remember 4 terrible bosses of your own, the strategies that worked, the ones that backfired, and most importantly, you remember that she survived and moved on. You can offer perspective she can't see from inside the storm. When the stock market drops or the news cycle spirals into chaos, you've seen it before. Not this exact crisis, but enough crises to know that panic rarely improves outcomes. You've developed what my friend Joan calls the long view. The ability to zoom out and see today's disaster as one chapter, not the whole story. And here's the gift nobody mentions. This accumulated wisdom makes you braver, not more cautious. You know which risks are worth taking because you've taken them. You know which battles matter because you fought the ones that didn't. You're not reckless. You're calibrated. My neighbor Ruth started painting at 62, not because she suddenly got talented, but because she finally understood that being good was never the point. She'd watched too many people wait for permission that never came. She'd attended too many funerals for women who'd planned to do something someday. Her wisdom told her, start now, start messy, start anyway. You also start appreciating what you once overlooked. The morning coffee tastes better because you know how many mornings you rushed through it. The conversation with your sister matters more because you've lost people you thought you'd have forever. The garden, the sunset, the book you're reading slowly. These aren't consolation prizes for youth. They're the whole point, and you finally have eyes to see it. This wisdom, this perspective, this clarity about what actually matters, it doesn't just change how you see the world. It changes what you choose to do with your remaining time. Which brings us to something unexpected. The complete dismantling and rebuilding of what you thought your life was supposed to be about. For most of us, the first 6 decades follow a script. Build the career, raise the family, maintain the house, check the boxes, and then, somewhere around 60, the script runs out. The kids are launched, the career peaks or ends, the house echoes with space you didn't know you'd have, and suddenly you're standing in front of a blank page asking, what now? My friend Barbara spent 37 years as a high school administrator. Respected position, good pension, everyone assumed she'd retire and, what? Play more bridge? She tried for about 6 months. Then she started volunteering at a literacy program. Within a year, she was running it. Not because she needed another job, but because she'd finally figured out what actually lit her up. Watching adults discover they could learn. Not managing teachers or navigating district politics, just the pure act of helping someone read their first full book. She told me, I spent decades doing what I was good at. Now, I'm doing what I care about. I wish I'd known the difference sooner. That's the gift of this age. You finally have the clarity and the courage to ask what matters to you, not to your parents, your spouse, your old boss, or the version of yourself who was trying to prove something at 35. Maybe you spent 40 years in a career that paid well but never quite fit. Now you're learning woodworking, or fostering dogs, or writing letters to your grandchildren that they'll read someday when you're gone. Maybe you're saying no to obligations that always felt mandatory, and yes to Tuesday morning walks with your sister. This isn't about having more time. It's about having clearer vision. You're not distracted anymore by what you're supposed to want. The promotions, the bigger house, the impressive vacation photos, they lose their grip. You know what actually fills you up because you've spent years watching what drained you. And here's what nobody tells you about aligning your life with your actual values. It creates energy, not depletes it. Which is exactly why at this stage, taking care of yourself stops feeling selfish and starts feeling essential. Because here's what shifts after 60. You finally understand that protecting your peace isn't optional. It's the foundation everything else rests on. For decades, you said yes when you meant no. You absorbed other people's stress like it was your job. You pushed through exhaustion because that's what strong women do. You carried emotional weight that was never yours to carry. And then one day, you notice how tired you are. Not just physically, soul tired. My neighbor Jean put it perfectly. I spent 50 years being everyone's shock absorber. Then I realized I'm not required to soften every blow for everyone around me. She started saying no to hosting every holiday. No to mediating her adult children's conflicts. No to phone calls that left her drained for days. And you know what happened? Her relationships didn't fall apart. They got healthier. Because she finally had the energy to show up as herself, not as everyone's emotional manager. This is the mental shift that changes everything. Understanding that boundaries aren't walls. They're the fence around your garden. They protect what you're trying to grow. Start small. Notice what depletes you and what restores you. Maybe it's 10 minutes of morning silence before you check your phone. Maybe it's finally telling your sister you can't be her therapist anymore. Maybe it's asking for help instead of white-knuckling through everything alone. Practice the pause. When someone asks something of you, try, "Let me think about that and get back to you." That 5-second gap between request and response. That's where your power lives. And if you're carrying old pain, old patterns, old stories that don't serve you anymore, this is your permission to get support. Therapy isn't for broken people. It's for people who are done carrying unnecessary weight. The resilience you've built over 60 years, it's real, but resilience doesn't mean never bending. It means knowing when to rest so you don't break. Because when you finally prioritize your own well-being, something remarkable happens. You stop just surviving your life. You start fully living it. And that clarity, that peace, that hard-won self-knowledge, it's exactly what makes this chapter so extraordinary. So why does it all finally click after 60? Because you've stopped performing. You've stopped apologizing for taking up space. You've stopped waiting for permission to live the life that actually fits you. You realize that all those years weren't wasted, they were necessary. Every detour taught you something. Every mistake showed you who you really are. Every loss made room for something truer. My friend Dorothy said something last week that made me stop in my tracks. I finally understand that becoming myself wasn't supposed to happen at 25. I didn't have enough information yet. That's it exactly. You needed 60 years of data. 60 years of trying things, losing things, building things, walking away from things. You needed to see what lasts and what doesn't, who stays and who leaves, what matters when everything else falls away. This isn't about reaching some finish line. It's about finally understanding that you've been enough all along. You just couldn't see it through all the noise. So here's what I want you to do. Take 5 minutes today and ask yourself, what do I actually want for this next chapter? Not what you should want. Not what would make someone else happy. What lights you up? What would you do if no one was watching? Write it down. Share it in the comments if you're brave. Because your story matters. Your clarity matters. Your 60+ years of hard-won wisdom, it matters. You're not winding down. You're finally fully awake. And that's worth celebrating.